Dear Heavenly Father, Lord, we thank you for the wonderful blessing this Sabbath has been and the closeness we've been able to experience with each other and in being able to confide in one another our difficulties and our struggles through life. Lord, there's so much damage that has been done throughout the years and so much healing and the fact that we have friends and family here in this little group to lean on is so helpful with that healing process, and we thank you and we praise you for how you've brought us together to this point to be able to express these things amongst friends and family who will accept us and still love us and be understanding and not just push us away or make us feel like our grievances aren't important or necessary to be talked about. This is such a wonderful opportunity and a blessing to have that openness and safe space to do that. And we gather today at this moment to learn more about equality and the LGBTQ issues and transgender issues and identity and gender roles and stereotypes. We're still learning about these things and trying to wrap our minds around all the different points of discussion. And we know at the very least that we're not to treat anyone badly and be judgmental and be harsh and cruel. We know at the very least that we're to be loving and kind and patient and as accepting as we can. So, for the rest of it, help us to be able to read through the arguments, to think about them, and to grow in our understanding so that when the message in this movement does come out, we'll be ready and pass the test with flying colors. We thank you so much for the path you've taken us on and how you've kept us all together. And we pray all these things in the Lord Jesus Christ's name. Amen.
Amen.
I was about to mute myself, but then I realized. Okay, so today we're going to go back to here. Let's see. I'm going to zoom in. We were charged with studying gender roles, stereotypes, and identity. And there's a lot to go reading through. Elaine has a couple really good articles that we're going to read through first, and then we're going to look into some issues that I don't know if any of you have encountered when you're studying through this topic, but there's groups within the feminist movement and different other movements that are actually really harmful, and they've taken a really strange feminist but also very conservative stance and have become kind of part of the problem. And you don't hear about them a lot. It's a niche group, but they're doing everything that they can to limit the rights of other people in the LGBTQ community. And it can be a little bit hard to understand the arguments around that, but we're going to get to it and we're going to look at it. We're not making any decisions of what's right or wrong, but we do need to kind of familiarize ourselves with what's happening out there and what are the types of groups that are hurting people. So we're going to do that. And when we start reading the articles, we're going to do popcorn reading because that way it gets more people involved. So, um, anyways, to begin, we're going to go back to gender roles and stereotypes. So we had a list that we made a couple Sabbaths ago, and I got a little bit more of a comprehensive list online here. So feminine characteristics you'll have not aggressive, and this is just typical, societal gender stereotypes. And not aggressive, dependent, easily influenced, submissive, passive, home oriented, easily hurt emotionally or sensitive, indecisive, talkative, gentle, sensitive to others' feelings or like empathic, very desirous of security, which is just meaning they're weak and they feel like they need protection, cries a lot, emotional, verbal, kind, tactful, and nurturing. And the masculine characteristics are aggressive, independent, not easily influenced, active, worldly, which I wanted a better definition of worldly so I could understand what it was talking about. And worldly is, in the modern context, the first definition is experienced and sophisticated. And secondly, it is of or concerned with material values or ordinary life rather than a spiritual existence. And both of those are pretty interesting. I'm not sure which one they're referring to here, but I thought I'd have that on the side. Moving on, not easily hurt emotionally, decisive, not at all talkative, tough, less sensitive to others' feelings, not very desirous of security, rarely cries, logical, analytical, cruel, blunt, and not nurturing. So some of the characteristics might be positive and some might seem really negative. So there's a mix there. And a lot of these, we decided that it's just how society has kind of relegated each each gender to those types of feelings. So when you have a man that exhibits a lot of characteristics on the feminine side, they're ostracized and judged. And if you have a female who's more expressing the characteristics on the masculine side, the same thing happens. Is that okay so far, or is everything making sense?
Yes.
Makes
Oh,
sense.
Yeah.
awesome. So we're going to start reading this article here that Elaine gave us. Who wants to start off?
I can read.
Okay, go for it.
So, what are gender roles? Gender roles in society means how we're expected to act, speak, dress, groom, and conduct ourselves based upon our assigned sex. For example, girls and women are generally expected to dress in typically feminine ways and be polite, accommodating, and nurturing. Men are generally expected to be strong, aggressive, and bold. Every society, ethnic group, and culture has gender role expectations, but they can be very different from group to group. They can also change in the same society over time. For example, pink used to be considered a masculine color in the US, while blue was considered feminine. I did not know that.
Mm-hmm.
So, how do gender stereotypes affect people? A stereotype is a widely accepted judgment or bias about a person or group, even though it's overly simplified and not always accurate. Stereotypes about gender can cause unequal and unfair treatment because of a person's gender. This is called sexism. There are four basic kinds of gender stereotypes. Personality traits, for example, women are often expected to be accommodating and emotional, while men are usually expected to be self-confident and aggressive. Domestic behaviors, for example, some people expect that women will take care of the children, cook and clean the home, while men take care of finances, work on the car, and do the home repairs. Occupations. Some people are quick to assume that teachers and nurses are women and that pilots, doctors, and engineers are men. Physical appearance. For example, women are expected to be thin and graceful, while men are expected to be tall and muscular. Men and women are also expected to dress and groom in ways that are stereotypical to their gender. Men wearing pants and short hairstyles, women wearing dresses and makeup. Hyperfemininity is the exaggeration of stereotype behavior that believed to be feminine. Hyperfeminine folks exaggerate the qualities they believe to be feminine. They may include being passive, naive, sexually inexperienced, soft, flirtatious, graceful, nurturing, and accepting.
I think a lot of that you see in Hollywood. In the media, they'll hyper feminize a lot.
It also seems like somebody's dream person, not
Right.
reality.
Yeah.
You mean like a Barbie doll?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Perfect point. Yeah.
Hypermasculinity is the exaggeration of stereotype behavior that's believed to be masculine. Hypermasculine folks exaggerate the qualities they believe to be masculine. They believe they're supposed to compete with other men and dominate feminine folks by being aggressive, worldly, sexually experienced, insensitive, physically imposing, ambitious, and demanding.
So this is kind of describing like alpha female and alpha male, isn't it?
Well,
I think so.
I don't know
Give it a
about,
definition of each one, a
Yeah.
female and male.
yeah, I don't know about alpha female, but
Yeah.
that, I don't know about that being alpha male. That's just being,
Like just a definition?
yeah, I mean, alpha, because alpha males, sometimes, my experience, you just know, even though they're quiet, you just know that he was in charge. So he doesn't, like when I was in, for example, like high school, you just knew, I mean, many of the guys, for example, let's just take, we had a lot of, let's see, where I grew up, a lot of Hispanics, a lot of Hispanic gangs, and they talk a lot of, what we call trash. And they portrayed this hyper masculinity. But then when we also had black gangs too, but then a real quiet group came in, but they were very quiet, but everybody knew that who the leaders were. And these were the Samoans, the Tongans. They were very gentle. They didn't talk trash, but everybody knew not to mess with them. So all this hypermasculinity, how you express yourself, I think it's, I don't know, culturally taught.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah, that is true because I've seen that too. Sometimes the quiet ones are scarier.
Yeah, because they came to the United States, I guess a little later, and they stuck together. They had this impressive martial arts skills that brought over from the islands, and they didn't have to show, quote unquote, their masculinity. Everybody knew that they were.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, where am I? Okay, so these exaggerated gender stereotypes can make relationships between people difficult. Hyper feminine folks are more likely to endure physical and emotional abuse from their partners. Hyper masculine folks are more likely to be physically and emotionally abusive to their partners.
Wow.
Extreme gender stereotypes are harmful because they don't allow people to fully express themselves and their emotions. For example, it's harmful to masculine folks to feel that they're not allowed to cry or express sensitive emotions. And it's harmful to feminine folks to feel that they're not allowed to be independent, smart, or assertive. Breaking down gender stereotypes allows everyone to be their best selves. Can I fight gender stereotypes? You probably see gender stereotypes all around you. You might also have seen or experienced sexism or discrimination based on gender. There are ways to challenge these stereotypes to help everyone, no matter their gender or gender identity, feel equal and valued as people. Pointed out, magazines, TV, film, and the internet are full of negative gender stereotypes. Sometimes these stereotypes are hard for people to see unless they're pointed out. Be that person. Talk with friends and family members about the stereotypes you see and help others understand how sexism and gender stereotypes can be hurtful. Be a living example. Be a role model for your friends and family.
That's biblical
Respect-
language right there.
A role model?
Be a living example.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, you be a role model for your friends and family. Respect people regardless of their gender identity. Create a safe space for people to express themselves and their true qualities, regardless of what society's gender stereotypes and expectations are. Speak up. If someone is making sexist jokes and comments, whether online or in person, challenge them. Yeah, because by being silent, you're just, what's the word?
Compliant.
Condoning.
Condoning,
Yeah,
yes.
Condoning.
Yes. Give it a try. If you want to do something that's not normally associated with your gender, think about whether you'll be safe doing it. If you think you will, give it a try. People will learn from your example. Yeah, I just want to talk about that. Give it a try. There's, I watched in TED Talks, and perhaps maybe some of you came across this particular person. Anyway, she is not an actress, not an actor. And I can't remember why she said she did this, but one day she decided to dress like a man. She just wanted to dress like a man, so she just dressed like a man, put up a mustache, and really not just dress like a man and act like a woman, but acted like a man, just to see, how it might feel like on the other side. And so, she went to the art museum, and she was admiring the arts, and a woman was hitting on him. Yeah, and he was going through all of this, and he finally went somewhere else, and then upstairs, and she followed him, and then finally she just had to go to the men's bathroom until he went. She disappeared, and then but now what she does. So this is not about cross-dressing. It's not about anything like that. But you do men. What she teaches, men to really dress like women and act the part of a woman, and women dress like men and act a part of men, to see, how they're treated. And I remember these experiments because, when I was in college, I had to act like I had a disability, and it was quite difficult and eye-opening. And so she teaches this, and she still does it. And so she's kind of, just brings out the lesson of, what the other side experiences. So that was a good TED Talk.
Yeah, it's you can try to practice empathy and try to mentally put yourself in someone else's shoes, but I think there's a lot you don't understand until you're actually there, you know. So
Like, just like what we were talking about, abortion as well. In that article, it talks about that it's a completely different story to argue for something until you actually wind up being in the situation.
If you've been struggling with gender or gender identity and expectations, you are not alone. It may help you to talk to a trusted parent, friend, family member, teacher, or counselor. Sex and gender identity. There's a lot more to being male, female, or any gender than the sex assigned at birth. Your biological or assigned sex does not always tell you a complete story. What are the differences between sex, gender, and gender identity? It's common for people to confuse sex, gender, and gender identity, but they are actually all different things. Sex is a label, male or female, that you're assigned by the doctor at birth based on the genitals you're born with and the chromosomes you have. It goes on your birth certificate. Yeah, there's another interesting one. It's called what was it? John study. But anyways, but I've watched so many of these, and I'm getting a little confused. But anyways, I guess she was born with both genitalia, and so they have to decide what sex. So I think a boy was chosen, the sex of boy was chosen, but then she always felt like a girl. But anyways, yeah, it got so messed up that just recently, I think 2005, he committed suicide. Yeah, because of his gender identity. Yeah, I think it's called, yeah, it's one of those person study. I can't remember.
It was you have it mixed up because it was mentioned in one of the presentations. I think that Debbie did. I can't remember, but he was born a boy. There were twins, boys, and his circumcision, the doctor was doing, it was burning off the foreskin, and he completely mutilated this poor boy's genitalia. So he decided, along with the parents, that they would just make him a girl. And so I think that they did do some surgery to make a pseudo vagina, and he urinated like out of his body. Anyways, so he grew up as a girl, and at a certain age, early teens, he was told that what had happened, that he was born a boy and all this, and he never felt comfortable as a girl. And so at shortly after finding out what had happened, he came out as a boy. And because that's what he felt like, was a boy, which that's what he was born as, but both he committed suicide. Yeah, he was married. I think he ended up married, but both of the boys died. And I'm not sure if I can't remember about if they both died by suicide, but this particular one, he was married but did commit suicide in 2005. but there was another one that I watched, and that's where the girl, she's a woman, a young woman, but she has testes. They're up inside. So she is, they call them, I think, intersex, not hermaphrodite, but intersex, because they have, I believe, both sets of hormone, both sets of
Gonads.
genitalia in a sense. Yeah, I'm not sure if it's the gonads or if it's just, externally she looked feminine, but she had testes inside instead of ovaries, I think is the deal. She didn't explain whether she was on hormones to be a female, but just, I can't, I've watched all those things too. But yeah, the Joan John study is an absolutely sad story about what the doctor did, first of all, to totally mutilate the baby, and what the parents agreed to do to try to cover up for it, and just the mental stresses. I just can't imagine. But yeah, that's the Joan John. You can just put Joan John study in and it will come right up. That wasn't a TED Talk. That was just something I read. And the other one was the female, intersex, I believe it's called. When they have, like, they either have the both gonads, but I think, because she just said I had testes, never mentioned that she also had ovaries, but I think out externally she looked like a girl, but then they discovered she didn't have ovaries, she had testes. So anyways, this just, strange results of sin, and you just have to have compassion for these people that trying to, figure out who they are, what they are, and then you've got society, trying to tell them what they should be. It's you can't imagine the mental health issues that go with that. So anyways, done. Just wanted to make that clarification.
Yeah, that's why
Yeah.
there's so much suicide in that, and when they're struggling to understand who and what they are, there's always been a lot of issues with suicide.
Yeah, thank you for clearing that up. I watched so many of them. They all stories, blend together, and I can't remember. I can't set each story straight. But thank you.
No, I totally understand.
So do I.
I watch a lot.
Yeah, but I can't help wonder that if we didn't have two gender stereotypes or two sex stereotypes, and if these people that were different came about, that there would really be no issue, because we won't be trying to categorize them left or right. They are just who they are, and we would just accept them as they are. Not to say that you're a male, you're a female, you got to be this, you got to act this way, you got to act that way. If we didn't have those stereotypes and stipulations, I don't think there would be all this much grief.
Yeah. Okay, let's continue.
That's because we have sin in the world. That's why we have all that's going on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I think in the Native American culture, there is male, gender-wise, male, female, and then it's called two-spirit. And so I don't know too much about it, but they're called two-spirit. And it's where they have qualities of a male and a female. I don't know if they have genitalias of both or whatever, but they have like both male female characteristics, and they're part of the society. They're not ostracized. It sounds like they're just part of acceptance as male female, and they call them two spirits. I don't know if any of you heard of that.
Yeah.
So. All right, so gender
There's
is.
other,
Oh, go ahead.
sorry, I was too lagged. There's other, I don't know what the word should be, but in nature, like seahorses, it's the males
Species.
that give birth.
Mhm.
Yeah, there, thank you.
You're welcome.
And snails, they have both reproductive organs. So it's in nature. I can't think of anything else right now. There might be some other examples, but it also is in nature,
Plants.
not just
Yeah, plant.
human beings. There you go. Yeah, good point.
So I'm just,
So I don't know, is that also because of sin?
can I just,
Or was that how God designed it?
can you hear me?
Yeah,
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So I had this in here and I'm going to save our place right there. And I wanted to, where is it? Here it is. Okay. Let me just fix this real quick because I want to know what we think is in nature the result of sin and what was from what God had initially intended, because part of what we're supposed to do is study God's nature book, and that's supposed to give us some insight into how he wanted things. And I just wanted to read this really quick if it's okay.
yes, please.
Let's see here. So, learning of God through his works. The Lord is good to all, and his tender mercies are over all his works. All thy works shall praise thee, O Lord, and thy saints shall bless thee. We love to contemplate the character and love of God in his created works. What evidences has he given the children of men of his power, as well as of his parental love? He has garnished the heavens and made grand and beautiful the earth. O Lord, our Lord, how excellent is thy name in all the earth. When I consider thy heavens, the work of thy fingers, the moon and the stars, which thou hast ordained, what is man that thou art mindful of him, and the son of man that thou visitest him? All thy works praise thee, O Lord, and thy saints shall bless thee. Had our world been formed with a perfectly level surface, the monotony would have fatigued the eye and wearied the senses. God has adorned our world with grand mountains, hills, valleys, and ranges of mountains. The rugged granite, bare mountains, also the mountains decorated with evergreens and verdure, and the valleys with their softened beauty, make the world a mirror of loveliness. The goodness, wisdom, and power of God are manifest everywhere, in mountains, rocks, hills, and valleys. I see the works of divine power. I can never be lonely while viewing the grand scenery of nature. On the journey over the plains and mountains, I have had feelings of the deepest reverence and awe while viewing the frowning precipice and snow-capped mountain heights. The mountains, hills, and valleys should be to us as schools in which to study the character of God in his created works. The works of God which we may view in the ever varying scenes, in mountains, hills, and valleys, and trees, shrubs, and flowers, and every leaf, every spire of grass, should teach us lessons of the skill and love of God and of his infinite power. Those who study nature cannot be lonesome. They love the quiet hours of meditation, for they feel that they are brought in close communion with God while tracing his power in his created works. So if we've had a very specific interpretation of the Bible of how male and female should be, when we look at nature, God's created works, and we see something that doesn't match with that, we'll say that that's an anomaly and that must be the cause of sin, right? So seahorses, there are other fish that the women actually are the ones who impregnate themselves. And it's, if you look into it, it's just so varied, and there's so much variety and change and difference among species and all kinds of things, and it's always interesting. And those the way that reproduction works for those species isn't just a strange thing that they do. It actually has a lot to do with population control among themselves and how to keep it balanced. So it has a specific purpose. And I just think that from nature, we can learn about variation and not having everything be exactly the same. Just like in the movement, we all have different personalities and different ways that we do things, different ways we grew up and learned, how to talk and interact. And we have to, see the beauty in all the diversity and the variation. So I just wanted to point that out, just to keep that in our minds as well, because it might help us understand this a little bit. So I just wanted to point that out. I don't know if it's okay. I hope it's okay.
No, it's fine. Thank you.
Because it's something that keeps coming back to my mind, because if you look into this, it is something that you end up having to take into consideration, because it's a part of all the species that are on this planet. Procreation is among all of them. Everything replicates and proliferates and procreates, and there's a pattern in everything. So it has to be a part of this conversation at some point, somewhere in here. So I just wanted to bring that into the mix. Anyways, we can continue reading if you want. I just wanted to point that out.
Right? Gender is much more complex. It's a social and legal status and set of expectations from society about behaviors, characteristics, and thoughts. Each culture has standards about the way that people should behave based on their gender. This is also generally male or female. But instead of being about body parts, it's more about how you're expected to act, behave, expected to act because of your sex. Gender identity is how you feel inside and how you express your gender through clothing, behavior, and personal appearance. It's a feeling that begins very early in life. What's assigned sex, aka biological sex? Assigned sex is a label that you're given at birth based on medical factors, including your hormones, chromosomes, and genitals. Most people are assigned male or female, and this is what's put on the birth certificates. When someone's sexual and reproductive anatomy doesn't seem to fit the typical definitions of male or female, they may be described as intersex. Some people call the sex we're assigned at birth biological sex. But this term doesn't fully capture the complex biological, anatomical, and chromosomal variations that can occur. Having only two options, biologically male or biologically female, might not describe what's going on inside a person's body. Instead of saying biological sex, some people use the phrase assigned male at birth or assigned female at birth. This acknowledges that someone, often a doctor, is making a decision for someone else. The assignment of a biological sex may or may not align with what's going on with a person's body, how they feel, or how they identify. The factors that determine our assigned sex begin as early as fertilization. Each sperm has either an X or Y chromosome in it. All eggs have an X chromosome. When sperm fertilizes an egg, its X or Y chromosome combines with the X chromosome of the egg. A person with XX chromosomes usually has female sex and reproductive organs, and is therefore usually assigned biologically female. A person with XY chromosomes usually has male sex and reproductive organs, and therefore usually assigned biologically male. Other arrangements of chromosomes, hormones, and body parts can happen, which results in someone being intersex. What's gender? Gender is much bigger and more complicated than assigned sex. Gender includes gender roles, which are expectations society and people have about behaviors, thoughts, and characteristics that go along with a person's assigned sex. For example, ideas about how men and women are expected to behave, dress, and communicate all contribute to gender. Gender is also a social and legal status as girls and boys, men and women. It's easy to confuse sex and gender. Just remember that biological or assigned sex is about biology, anatomy, and chromosomes. Gender is society's set of expectations, standards, and characteristics about how men and women are supposed to act. What's gender identity? Your gender identity is how you feel inside and how you express those feelings. Clothing, appearance, and behaviors can all be ways to express your gender identity. Most people feel that they're either male or female. Some people feel like a masculine female or a feminine male. Some people feel neither male nor female. These people may choose labels such as genderqueer, gender variant, or gender fluid. Your feelings about your gender identity begin as early as age 2 or 3. Some people's assigned sex and gender identity are pretty much the same or in line with each other. These people are called cisgender. Other people feel that their assigned sex is of the other gender from their gender identity. Assigned sex is female, but gender identity is male. For example, these people are called transgender or trans. Not all transgender people share the same exact identity. What is intersex? Intersex is an umbrella term that describes bodies that fall outside the strict male-female binary. There are lots of ways someone can be intersex. What does intersex mean? Intersex is a general term used for a variety of situations in which a person is born with reproductive or sexual anatomy that doesn't fit the boxes of female or male. Sometimes sometimes doctors do surgeries on intersex babies and children to make their bodies fit binary ideas of male or female. Doctors always assign intersex babies a legal sex, male or female, in most states. But just like with non-intersex people, that doesn't mean that's the gender identity they'll grow up to have. This brings up questions about whether or not it's okay to do medical procedures on children's bodies when it's not needed for their health. Being intersex is a naturally occurring variation in humans, and it isn't a medical problem. Therefore, medical interventions like surgeries or hormone therapies on children usually aren't medically necessary. Being intersex is also more common than most people realize. It's hard to know exactly how many people are intersex, but estimates suggest that about 1 to 2 in 100 people born in the US are intersex. Well, that's interesting. I have not even heard the term intersex until now. I thought while I was reading this, I was thinking the same question. This is not medically necessary, and if they were just left alone, neither assigned male nor female, but they were just left naturally as who they are, we'll have more of them. So it will be a more common occurrence. And we wouldn't think twice about their gender identity because, that's who they are.
Yeah, and
But because we box them one or the other, we and sounds like probably we box them in a wrong category to begin with.
that's what
Well,
I-
you never let them decide. So that's I mean, I don't think people realize how crazy that is to decide their sex and do it by surgery.
yeah, that's
before
what
they
I was
can-
gonna say too. If their baby's born and you're the parent, what possesses you to choose one or the other to say this is what I want it to be? It's like I would think you have to let the child grow.
Yeah, and if they just grew, they might be happy. As long as they were accepted, of course. They might be happy about being neither male nor female identity or gender specific. They are who they are. And there would be no confusion. Or they could, if they feel in hormonally or whatever makes them feel one way or the other, then they can decide to change to whatever they feel, whoever they feel that they are. I think that would be more appropriate. So there are many different ways someone can be intersex. Some intersex people have genitals or internal sex organs that fall outside the male-female categories, such as a person with both ovarian and testicular tissues. Other intersex people have combinations of chromosomes that are different than XY, usually associated with male, and XX, usually associated with female, like XXY. And some people are born with external genitals that fall into the typical male-female categories, but their internal organs or hormones do not. If persons' genitals look different from what doctors and nurses expect when they're born, someone might be identified as intersex from birth. Other times, someone might not know they're intersex until later in life, like when they go through puberty. Sometimes a person can live their whole life without ever discovering that they're intersex. Wow.
Can you believe how we've always got mad at parents who are trying to help their kids who don't feel like they're in the right bodies, and we've been accusing them of mutilating them, but really it's been us and the whole medical community who
Mutilated.
want to go by general gender stereotypes that have been mutilating people.
Mhm.
It's crazy.
Yeah, it is crazy.
And imagine what goes on in the young mind. You got all this confusion to begin with, and then your parents add to it and make things so much worse. It really messes people up.
Yeah.
Well, I wonder, have they, people, I mean, sometimes a person can live their whole life without ever discovering that they're intersex. So, I mean, how does that happen? I just want to try to understand this part because I mean, at some point, they have to know that they're intersex because they have to realize, because it says discovering,
Yeah,
right?
so it's the way it'll typically go is so let's say a female is born assigned female at birth, the sex based off genitalia, which appears to be normal female genitalia, and that individual identifies as a female as well, so there's never anything that seems remiss until maybe sometime they have to go get a gynecological exam, and then they order maybe like an ultrasound or an MRI, and they find out that there are testicles in the inguinal canal or in the pelvic region that no one had known were there before. They're usually underdeveloped and not functioning gonadal structures, but they're there and they're present, and that's a part of intersex. So you would never know unless you have to have a scan done medically.
So maybe if I keep reading on, it'll explain what my next question is. How do they feel about this? So what happens when someone is born intersex? Most of the time when a baby is born intersex, doctors and the family decide on a sex, either male or female, and raise the baby as the gender expected of that sex. It's pretty common for surgery to be done on the baby's genitals and also for the child to be given hormones to make them fit into male or female categories as they go through puberty.
So the reason why that decision is made is because they want to have them be a functioning regular member of society. And because society is structured a very specific way, they don't want their kids to be bullied or whatever for being different. But the problem is that society is the one that ought to change, not, you know, you don't go mutilating, but it's just so backward.
Right. Let's see. But activism by and for intersex people is growing, leading to some changes in our culture, which right now treats intersex as a medical problem instead of a natural, healthy way bodies can be. Today, more and more people believe unnecessary surgery and other medical interventions shouldn't be done on intersex babies and children at all. Instead, intersex people should be able to decide for themselves when they're older if they want treatment or surgery.
Mm-hmm.
How about if treatment or surgery at all?
Mm-hmm.
It's just
Yeah.
a matter of people being educated. Because as you were saying what you were saying, Adrian, I'm thinking of myself when my kids were, young. What would I have thought without the education that we've been gaining this last year or so? What might I have thought? Because what you pointed out with, that I know how sensitive I was to how my kids might be treated in school, just because based on how I was treated in school. And so I, really strove to raise them up with confidence and to have confidence in themselves and to not be bothered by what people thought about them. But what might we have done if it was facing us without the proper education? So education really means a lot, rather than to just go and do things blindly without information. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Yes, definitely.
And surgery is such a major thing to do.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, we have one more paragraph here, Phil, if you want to read it real quick.
Okay. If you have a child who is intersex, the best thing you can do is support them and love them for who they are. It's also a good idea to find some support from other parents with children who are intersex, and make sure your child has opportunities to connect with other children who are intersex. A good place to start is Interact.
And there's a link there. So that was really good. And it touched on different gender identities and expression. And all of this confusion, and I know initially when we started to think about this and from what was happening in culture, hearing that there's people who are gender fluid and gender non-conforming and all of this, and it sounds really crazy and confusing. But there are people who the way they feel, the way they act, their feelings and characteristics, they can't match it to a typical feminine gender or masculine gender because of how society structured it. So it's mostly seems to be a product of just our cultural upbringing, that there has to be these new terms implemented because people can't really identify with what the two things that exist are. And that's kind of, we have to understand where those people are coming from, because it is difficult for people.
As Elaine mentioned, this is education is so important, and I'm so glad that we are going through these and we are being educated. Because before, I'm being educated now, but when I was ignorant, I just thought these people were just what do you call those?
Psychological some
Yeah, just counter culture being
oh, okay.
yeah, being obnoxious and, all that. I didn't know that this was really, it's real.
Yeah, it's real. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know
And
if
look how backwards we've all been. Look how backwards, look at the work that's ahead of us, because look how backwards. This is going to be freeing for many people who have been oppressed, suppressed, persecuted. To it has made us, well, I think it was Troy that put in the chat earlier on, I can't remember, but when you go all the way back to he didn't put it this way, but you go back to Eden, whatever it was that he said in there, I don't remember, but it made me think about, how Elder Tess said that something went really wrong really quick, and how for as long as even before I knew religion, I'd hear people talk about Eve and blame the woman. So you can see the sexism came right off the bat. But what's really interesting when I sit and think about that, okay, so Eve did what she did, and you choose to blame the whole humanity wants to make this role in all of this on the woman, and that's carried throughout these 6,000 years. But what about the man? Did the man not do anything wrong? It's like taking it down to an individual level. How can we judge someone for their sin when we have, I think Troy put this one in too, is when I have a mote in my own eye? And I don't know, it's just really, it's going to be freeing for a lot of people, what God has been trying to teach us for a long time when it comes to loving people for whoever they are, for whatever gender identity, whatever gender, whatever sex they were born with, whatever color they were born with, whatever nationality. Love people instead of hate.
Yeah, I mean, it's freeing me up.
Yeah,
I feel free.
yeah.
So we're gonna go to this next one, and I'm gonna try to read through it a little bit quicker because I want to get to the more difficult topic to understand. It's gonna have us kind of straining a little bit, but it's important to think about.
One more quick thing is the education helps us to make responsible decisions and choices. You don't make good and right choices when you live in that bubble of captivity. Somebody referred to my bubble as captivity earlier. You don't make good and responsible, wise decisions uneducated. So the education I'm very thankful for.
Yeah, like Elder Parmender said in the study of nature of man, God is giving us new information.
Yes.
Yeah. So gender stereotyping. Gender stereotyping is defined as an overgeneralization of characteristics, differences, and attributes of a certain group based on their gender. Gender stereotypes create widely accepted biases about certain characteristics or traits and perpetuate the notion that each gender and associated behaviors are binary. Under this assumption, if a man or a woman act differently from how their gender is expected to behave, there is a disconnect in the evaluator's mind. As our society moves to a broader construct of what gender means, individuals who are stuck in this binary idea of gender have a difficult time wrapping their brains around individuals who do not fit into a strict gender dichotomy or do not identify with any gender at all. For example, assertive women are called B word and the W word. They're there. I'm not going to say them. While men who don't appear or act masculine are called sissies or wimps, or assumed to be gay, which is a very offensive stereotype in the LGBT community. Gender stereotypes are dangerous because they can cause us to might be disoriented in our perceptions. When individuals don't conform to our gender stereotypes, the result can lead to discrimination and unequal or create unequal or unfair treatment. To a certain person, I don't know where all these typos came in from, to a certain person who chooses to defy people's assumptions about his or her gender. When gender inequality occurs in the background of gender stereotyping, this is, in the most basic sense, sexism.
The typos were in the article.
Were they? Okay.
Yeah, they were in the article.
I thought I did something weird when I copied and pasted, which has
Okay.
happened, and I was like, what did I do? Okay. So again, just like our elder said, this issue is a part of sexism. So when you talk about the LGBTQ plus community or trans people or intersex, whatever you want, it all comes back to sexism, and sexism goes right back to gender stereotyping. So it's all part of the same kit and caboodle. I don't know how else to say it, but we are easily thrown in terms of our interactions with others for whom our brain has not been programmed to stereotype to some degree. This is because stereotyping enables us to make sense of the world, at least sometimes. Sometimes someone who considers themselves gender fluid or gender nonconforming threatens the stereotypes we are familiar with, and for that reason can seem as weird or threatening because we can't even stereotype them the way that we're used to doing. So they don't fit the boxes that we were taught growing up. And that means there's something wrong with them because they don't fit that. Instead, we could have, grown and learned and grown our understanding. But anyways, every day, transgender and gender nonconforming people bear the brunt of social and economic marginalization due to discrimination based on their gender identity or expression. Advocates face this reality regularly, working with transgender people who have lost housing, been fired from jobs, experienced mistreatment and violence, or been unable to access the health care they need. 63% of transgender and gender nonconforming people experience serious acts of discrimination, events that have a major impact on a person's quality of life. We need to work hard to fight against ingrained stereotypes and challenge these worldviews. In general, gender discrimination occurs when an employer treats one employee differently based on his or her sex. In many instances, and this goes back to transgender and the issues we have with that, and we're going to read an article that really cuts at the heart of this in a minute because it goes back to the Supreme Court cases about firing someone based on their sex and sexism. It is encompassed with transgender in there as well, and so we'll look at that. In many instances, the employer will rely on a stereotype as the basis for this unequal treatment. These stereotypes can be most pernicious when decision makers view women negatively because of their sexual orientation, gender identity, and/or gender expression. For example, the employer may say that a woman cannot perform a certain duty because women are not as strong as men, or because women are too emotional. Many employers will rely on these stereotypes when deciding whether to promote one employee over another. Women lose ground when educators and employers make decisions based on outdated stereotypes about the roles of women at work, at school, or in regard to their perceived role as mothers and wives. Many employers may decide to hire or promote a male candidate, assuming that a female candidate of a certain age range will become pregnant. Although often people presume that gender-based stereotypes target women, stereotypes geared toward men exist as well, and we talked a little bit about that last Sabbath. For example, an employer may believe that a woman is better equipped for a job because women are more sensitive than men, so like nursing, or because a woman is more sexually appealing. The state of New York and New York City have enacted a number of laws that provide protections for employees from inappropriate and unnecessary gender discrimination. These laws require an employer to treat employees and hiring candidates equally throughout every phase of the employment process. This includes matters involving hiring, compensation, layoffs, promotions, job training, work conditions, benefits, and other privileges if an employer treats candidates or employers differently based on their gender in relation to any of these matters. The employer likely has engaged in gender discrimination. Additionally, under the U.S. Equal Employment Opportunity Commission's Equal Pay Act of 1963, both women and men are required to receive equal pay for substantially equal jobs within the same company. This does not only include salary, but also encompass benefits, stock options, bonuses, and overtime compensation. Ultimately, if you are performing substantially the same work as an employee of another gender and receiving less pay, you may have a claim against your employer pursuant to this law. Okay, so here's the issue that we have to deal with. Now that we're learning about gender roles and gender stereotypes, we're gonna have an issue. Let me get my little writing thingy. Okay, so what we've learned, right? What have we learned about gender and gender roles? Who can tell me? Are they biological or are they culture based?
They're society, culture based.
Okay, so gender roles, they're society and culture based. So they're not cemented because it changes from country to country. I don't know what other word to use.
They're not
Um,
natural.
Yeah. So the issue we're going to come into now is with transgender individuals, because the way transgender individuals choose to express their internal feelings is through these societal gender stereotype gender roles. Does that make sense what I'm saying?
Yes, it
You're
makes sense what
really-
you're saying.
So-
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, it makes sense what you're saying. But I'm gonna let you finish because I get where you're going.
Have you been looking into this too?
Well, I've been educated on it
Okay.
because of my field and of studying, and my work and everything. So yeah, and I've been watching, stuff. So yeah, I know. And I had this thought in my head too, just from experience and the work that I do. So I do work with transgender individuals, and so yeah.
Yeah. So we're gonna get into a
You're
situation.
actually saying, Adriana, that they are promoting the wrong view because
Well,
they are
it-
also
it-
not meaning to maybe, but because they've also fallen prey to the culture and society based models.
So
Is that what
that's
you mean?
that's what I used to think, but I was pretty sure that something was wrong with that. So I kept studying on my own, trying to figure out what was going on. And through a lot of, and it takes a lot of research to get, to even figure out how to Google what you're trying to figure out the answer to. And I finally got stumbled, I don't know, across an article or someone where they were talking about, it was a transgender woman who used to be a man, but she is kind of a philosopher. I can't remember. But she was basically making the point that they don't have a choice with the way society is structured right now. The roles are what they are, and for them to be referred to as what they prefer to be referred to as, they have to perform these stereotypes that have been built up over time. You know what I mean? And some of them would prefer not to have to put on makeup and put on jewelry to be referred to as female or male or what have you. But because of how society is structured, and because these stereotypes have been so ingrained, if a transgender woman is walking down the street and she doesn't have any of those external signals, then no one's going to say ma'am or miss. They're going to say hello sir, and that's going to be kind of traumatizing to them. So it gets into a really complex issue, and we're not deciding whether something is good or bad. But one thing that I do want to note, we're going to read this really quick, and then I want to get into this article where it talks about trans exclusionary radical feminists and what they've been doing, and how the wrong view of the situation can lead to some really misguided actions. So Let's see here. Why are the trans women making headlines so stereotypically feminine? For transgender females, femininity covers a wide range of expression, just as it does for any girl or woman. However, the gender public is probably going to be more captivated by a trans woman who is super feminine. So the media will deliver trans celebrities like Caitlyn Jenner. To illustrate the wider spectrum of trans feminine expression, here's a video by award-winning journalist Mahala Gaylord, and I have not watched that video, but featuring a teenager who puts care into her appearance but doesn't subscribe. I would really want to watch that video. To the ultra feminine ideals embraced by the larger society. Unfortunately, when a trans woman isn't super feminine, some people are confused by why she would go to the trouble of coming out when she's not going all out. According to a trans woman I know who calls herself a tomboy, by not looking like the feminine stereotype, people actually question her sincerity. Like, why be a woman if you're not going the whole distance? But even when female gender identity lines up with female anatomy, not all of those women go the whole distance. For example, regular women who are born women can be tomboys as well. So why would we insist that trans women do? Perhaps as society tolerates more diversity of gender expression, all of us will become freer to express ourselves as however masculine or feminine we feel, without being obliged to go to the far ends of the spectrum or cave into stereotypes. You can start today by simply being and accepting your true self just the way nature and nurture made you. So I thought that was a neat, concise little explanation on that. And now I want to go to this group. So feminism and women's rights movement has been growing throughout the years. 1800s, we know it was there. In 1900s, women had already understood how gender roles affect women's rights. And by the 1900s, they were already going above and beyond our understanding of, equality and all of these things. And they had already started to play around with the idea of what does gender even mean and all of these things. Well, in the 1970s, I think this article might get into it. Feminism had a split, and we're gonna go. I think it's gonna get into it, but there's a group section of feminism that is called trans exclusionary radical feminists. There's a short word for it, for the acronym is TERF, but they are very against the existence of trans people and they view them as parasites. So it's become a really toxic place in those areas. And maybe it wouldn't be that big of a deal if it weren't for the fact that they're doing everything in their power to get involved in making laws that ban the existence of trans people. So this is something that we need to be aware of. And I wanted to read this article about it, if that's okay with everyone.
Yes, please.
Yes,
Okay.
sure.
It's kind of long. I don't know if we'll get all the way through it, but we'll do our best. Let's see here. The rise of anti-trans radical feminists explained. Amy Stevens had been working in funeral services for 20 years, nearly 6 of which were at Harris Funeral Homes. When she came out to her boss as transgender, she had known since she was 5 years old that she was a girl and had been living as a woman outside of work for some time. Though she loved her job at Harris, where she had worked her way up from apprentice to funeral director, she felt she had to hide who she was there until she couldn't any longer. In 2013, she gave the funeral home's owner, Thomas Rost, a note that she also shared with friends and colleagues. I realize that some of you may have trouble understanding this. In truth, I have had to live with it every day of my life, and even I don't fully understand it myself, she wrote. As distressing as this is sure to be to my friends and some of my family, I need to do this for myself and for my own peace of mind, and to not end the agony in my soul. After he read the note, Ross simply said, "Okay." Stevens was fired 2 weeks later. Ross told her that it was not going to work out. Stevens sued, claiming her dismissal was discrimination on the basis of her sex. setting off a flurry of legal activity. According to court documents, Ross testified that he fired Stevens because she was no longer going to represent herself as a man. She wanted to dress as a woman. Under oath, he said that. So, last March, the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals ruled in her favor. It is analytically impossible to fire an employee based on that employee's status as a transgender person without being motivated, at least in part, by the employee's sex. The court said in its decision, an employer cannot discriminate on the basis of transgender status without imposing its stereotypical notions of how sexual organs and gender identity ought to align. So it goes right back to that Supreme Court case about sexism in the workplace. So Harris Funeral Homes appealed to the Supreme Court, which took up the case, and will hear oral arguments on October 8. How anti-trans radical feminist groups could affect the outcome of a civil rights discrimination case. In recent weeks, a flurry of amicus briefs have been filed in the case RG&GR, Harris Funeral Homes versus EEOC and Amy Stevens. Major medical organizations, advocacy groups, and legal experts have weighed in mostly in favor of allowing trans people to be free of discrimination at work. Meanwhile, a slew of conservative and religious groups have claimed the right to fire anyone for being trans. Even President Trump's Department of Justice filed a brief in August arguing in part that Stevens was fired by Harris Funeral Homes not for her gender identity, but because she refused to follow her employer's dress code, which requires men, and by men, the DOJ means men of biological sex, to wear a suit with pants, and women to wear a dress or a skirt, which is sexist, and that no place you work at should be requiring that anyways. That's horrible. So the ACLU attorneys representing Stevens in turn argued that their client was fired because Stevens failed to perform the sex role her employer expected of her, violating the legal precedent established in the 1989 in Price Waterhouse versus Hopkins. And this is that legal case that Elder Tess brought to our understanding.
Yeah, and in 1989.
Yeah, so that's why she brought it up, because it's in that case that woman at that law firm
Yeah.
wasn't wearing makeup and acting the way they wanted, and they fired her for that. So in that case, Ann Hopkins was denied, and this case goes right back to the precedent that this case set, because transgender and sexism are completely linked. You can't separate them because of how it talks about gender and gender roles and stereotypes. So in that case, Ann Hopkins was denied promotions and a partnership because she didn't look, dress, or behave in a stereotypically feminine enough manner. Her bosses instructed her to wear more makeup and skirts to work in order to get the promotion. The court sided with Hopkins, establishing a legal standard for sex stereotyping that has fundamentally transformed the workplace for women for the past 30 years. Now that precedent is being put to the test, and joining the Trump administration and conservatives is the fight over sex-based discrimination and stereotypes are several somewhat unexpected allies, so-called radical feminist groups with long records of opposing the rights of transgender people. In their amicus brief to the Supreme Court, the Women's Liberation Front, or WOLF, writes, simply, Amy Stevens is a man. He wanted to wear a skirt while at work, and his gender identity argument is an ideology that dictates that people who wear skirts must be women, precisely the type of sex stereotyping forbidden by Price Waterhouse. So this right here just illustrates how confusing this can get if you're not really thinking about it. Do you understand what I'm saying? That's why I wanted to bring this up, because it's something we're going to have to think about and try to understand in our heads, because it's going to get really twisted sounding in here. But the actions of this, yeah.
Sister Adriana, can you explain to us what's going on in your mind when you say it gets a little bit confusing? Can you let us into what you're thinking?
Yeah, that's probably a good plan. Let me see here. So what we just said is Wolf, this group of radical feminists, is saying that if a transgender person exists, if a let's say male to female, so MTF in the in the medical industry, that's what you would classify so that you know what's going on. If this individual wanted to start wearing skirts, skirts are a part of the gender stereotype of female, right? So what radical feminists, the wolf and the trans exclusionary individuals are saying is that if a trans individual wants to wear a skirt, they're just reinforcing gender stereotypes as female. And so they are actually being sexist. But what we're saying, in the liberal people who are trying to protect trans rights, what they're saying is that they have no choice, because to be identified as who they feel on the inside, they have no choice but to meet, societal expectations of what that is. Otherwise, they get misgendered and traumatized every single day when they're not referred to as who they feel like inside. So the perspective we're trying to take is an empathetic perspective to trans individuals and the things that they have to go through daily. And what the radical feminists, the trans exclusionary individuals say is that you shouldn't exist, because by your mere existence, you're reinforcing a system that we're trying to destroy. So does that make sense a little bit more? It's going to get into more detail in here, and we'll see how they go about trying to prove their point, which is pretty mean. But does that help a little bit?
Thank you.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, for explaining. Thank you.
Okay. I think I read that. So groups like Wolf are commonly referred to as trans exclusionary radical feminists, or TERFs. They alternate among several theories that all claim that trans women are really men who are the ultimate oppressors of women. Most of their ideas, like that trans women are a threat to cisgender women's safety, are based on cherry-picked cases of horrific behavior by a small number of trans people. Above all else, their ideology doesn't allow for trans people to have self-definition or any autonomy over their gender expression. So sex is grounded in materiality, whereas gender identity is simply an ideology that has no grounding in science, Wolf told Vox in a statement. The redefinition of the word sex to mean gender identity would have myriad harmful effects on women and girls, and women and girls are a distinct category, deserve civil rights protections. The key to understand, so it comes from this idea that women, have been completely destroyed over time, and all men are evil, every single one, and they've all done this to women. They're all oppressors. So the fact that a man can transition to being a woman, that what they view as an ultimate oppressor, getting to transition into a victim and get the benefits of, getting treated like a victim by protections from the law, is just unacceptable to them. Does that make sense? It's a very
Sad.
Yeah.
intense view. All women are victims and all men are oppressors, like, period.
Wow.
Nothing else in between. So women have to have special everything and whatever. So they just, it's like a resentment that a man can become a part of their group that, has all this history of being, oppressed and all this, and now can get all these protections or what have you. So that's pretty much where this is all stemming from. And it says it right here, what in their statement. Where is it? Let me get the other thing. So where did I read? The definition of the word sex side. Okay. The key to understanding why a self-proclaimed radical feminist group would side with conservatives arguing for the right to force cisgender women into skirts at work is to understand who TERFs are and what they've been up to for the past 50 years. Because now, under the Trump administration and a conservative majority Supreme Court, their alliance with these far-right groups could have lasting, widespread consequences for trans civil rights and for the rights of women in general.
Can I say something? Yeah, I mean, on the women's kind of the dress thing, Isn't it like even on the news, the ladies have to dress a certain way or they can't be the newscasters?
Well, that's a yeah, that's been pointed out how even on liberal news sources, I haven't seen women branch out into being completely not having to wear that type of outfit. But on conservative news, like Fox, they really end up being really sexualized and have to wear, very specific dress code and skirts and all that and look as feminine as possible. So yeah, it's confusing why feminists would align with conservatives, but it's just because of hatred. Do you know what I'm
That
saying?
makes sense, yeah.
So this is why I said the subject can get a little bit confusing. But I think this article explains it pretty good. So online roots of the term TERF originated in the late 2000s, but grew out of 1970s radical feminist circles after it became apparent that there needed to be a term to separate radical feminists who support trans women and those who don't. Many anti-trans feminists today claim it's a slur, despite what many see as an accurate description of their beliefs. They now prefer to call themselves gender critical, a euphemism akin to white supremacists calling themselves race realists. In the early 70s, groups of what would now be called gender critical feminists threatened violence against many trans women who dared exist in women's and lesbian spaces. For example, so basically, what they see trans women is as men in sheep's like wolves in sheep's clothing. That's all they see them as. They don't actually feel like they are who they feel inside. They just see them as men pretending to be women to I don't know, cause some kind of damage. They don't actually want to understand where they're coming from. So, for example, trans women, Beth Elliott, who was at the 1973 West Coast Lesbian Feminist Conference to perform with her lesbian band, was ridiculed on stage and had her existence protested. In 1979, radical feminist Janice Raymond, a professor at the University of Massachusetts, wrote the defining work of the TERF movement, Transsexual Empire, The Making of the She-Male, in which she argued that transsexualism should be morally mandating it out of existence, mainly by restricting access to transition care, a political position shared by the Trump administration. Soon after, she wrote another paper, this one published for the government-funded Health and Human Services linked National Center for Healthcare Technology. The Reagan administration cut off Medicare and private health insurance coverage for transition-related care. Oh, yeah. So that's the other thing, Susan, that that's a good point, that as far as the LGBTQ movement, if you guys remember the Stonewall riots, those were pretty much started by the transgender community because of all the beating up and discrimination that they were getting. So the LGBTQ community actually owes a lot to the transgender community for starting those riots, which ended up taking over all of the United States and then other countries. It spilled over everywhere. And a lot of LGBTQ rights came out of that movement that was started by transsexual people. So it's really amazing that they, certain groups of radical feminists can do this. So after those early flashpoints, the dispute between trans people and gender critical folks simmered for the next 20 years. One exception is the high profile conflicts at the Michigan Women's Folk Festival, or Mitchfest, which caught plenty of attention in the 1990s and early aughts. I don't know what that was supposed to say, but pro-trans festival attendees organized Camp Trans, a space specifically welcoming to trans women who were otherwise banned from attending the event. The two groups clashed for a number of years until more artists and organizations boycotted Mitchfest and organizers chose to end the event in 2015. However, in the past several years, TERFism has found new life and fostered fertile recruiting ground in many online spaces. Though trans people experienced a dramatic increase in visibility with the rise of trans actress Laverne Cox and Caitlyn Jenner's headline-grabbing transition, that visibility has resulted in a grown cultural backlash. So because they've come into awareness, the trans exclusionary feminists really have come out of the woodwork as well to fight against that. So while the majority of the backlash is simply a continuation of the conservative-driven culture war, some extremist feminists have decided that trans rights go too far. So you can see that they're aligning themselves with a conservative worldview. And so this helps us to figure out what side that they're on of equality. And so it does clear up the argument quite a bit there. So TERF ideology has become the de facto face of feminism in the UK, helped along by media leadership from Rupert Murdoch. And Rupert Murdoch is the one who has been instrumental in bringing up Fox News in the United States, Sky News in Australia, and another one in the UK that are the far right leaning conservative medias that are there, that are, they're not non-biased, they're very biased. So that's Rupert Murdoch, that's his media empire in the United States, Australia, and the UK. So in the Times of London, I think that might be his news thing. So any vague opposition to gender critical thought in the UK brings along accusations of silencing women and a splashy feature or op-ed in a British national newspaper. Australian radical feminist Sheila Jeffreys went before the UK Parliament in March 2018 and declared that trans women are parasites, language that sounds an awful lot like Trump speaking about immigrants. So is it starting to get a little bit clearer now that we're seeing how they're aligning themselves?
Yeah.
Yes, yes.
So it's one group wanting equality that doesn't think the other deserves equality and rights.
Yeah.
Yeah. So they've tribalized themselves into the idea that it's really at its roots, it's very childish. It's girls and only girls, and you're not a real girl because you were a man and men oppressed us, and that's weird that a man can come here and be a girl, It's that argument. It's a weird sandbox argument as far as I'm concerned in my head. That's how I call them, because it's just, me and mine and very exclusionary and selfish.
Still kind of comes to a lack of education. It seems. I don't know.
I was recently watching something on the news about the new law in Arkansas that bans transgender women from sports. So there's a lot of women who are upset that transgenders are allowed to, transgender women are allowed to play in women's sports.
Yeah.
And, it's just really sad, that there are laws created to ban. And it's all over the argument as what you're discussing, that they're not, women, that they shouldn't be allowed to play in women's sports, because they still see them as men, just wanting to be women, like that kind of mentality. You know what I'm saying? Like
that's a huge
yeah.
point, actually, and I'm glad you bring that up, because sports is a really, really big issue where this is having a lot of backlash. So I'm just gonna put sports issues, and this has really gotten a lot of people angry because sports is a huge moneymaker. It's a
Well,
huge
you-
moneymaker in the Olympics, and it comes back to national pride and nationalism, and the Olympics and representing your country and what all is going on, and it just all ties in back, and it's really an issue we have to understand as well. So thank you, Victoria. That was awesome.
they were also talking about a boxing one where a man was a women boxer, but they didn't want them to have it that way because I guess when you're a man, you can beat up women better. So they were afraid of that.
So there's a lot of you know how the right uses inflammatory articles to stoke the
Yeah.
flames of hatred and all of that.
Mhm.
What in reality happens with people who transition is they go on a hormone regimen, which completely changes your muscle and bone structure. And it is very easy to do that. Like women who go through menopause and all of a sudden their bone density falls through the ground because of estrogen and progesterone going down and everything. So hormone treatment, I mean, they have chemical castration. They can just castrate someone chemically. Hormones have such a huge effect, and they will never want to admit that or take that into consideration, because there have been men who transitioned to women and gone into sports and lost a lot to other born female competitors. But it's never acknowledged because the point is to stoke the flames of hate.
Right.
So they'll use the most inflammatory, outrageous, obviously unfair thing that they could muster up. And a lot of times they'll doctor it quite a bit just to make it fit their point. And so that's where it all ends up going. So sports issues with transgender is always a huge source of frustration for conservatives. So, according to Heron Greensmith, who studies the modern gender critical movement as a senior research associate with the social justice think tank Political Research Associates, gender critical feminism in the UK grew out of a toxic mix of historical imperialism and the influence of the broader UK skeptical movement in the early aughts. Does that mean 80s? Is that what is that aughts thing? I can't.
The last one was right after a 1990s. So I'm wondering if it's like the beginning of the 2000s or something. I was going to look it up and I got
Yeah.
distracted.
Can you check it out real quick if it comes up again? I don't want to be.
If I don't get distracted. Hold on.
Yeah.
Yeah, keep going.
So which was
The
hyper focused?
It's the first 9 years of the 2000s.
Okay.
Oh, really?
That-
Uh-huh.
Right.
It has a zero in front of it, so 2000 to 2009 is the aught.
I never heard it referred to that, and now we know. We just learned something new.
I
Okay.
never did either. David's telling me this.
All right. So there was a skeptical movement in the UK in the early aughts, so early 2000 to 2009.
Because it's
wa-
the first decade of the century. So anytime,
Okay.
1900 to 1909, 2000 to 2009.
Got it. Okay. Which was hyper focused on debunking junk science, quote unquote, and any idea that considered sociological and historical influences, not just biology. Those who rose to prominence in the movement did so through a lot of non tolerant calling out and attacking people. Greensmith said, much like gender critical feminism, anti trans feminists think they have science on their side. It is bananas how ascientific their rhetoric is, and yet literally they say biology isn't bigotry. In fact, biology has been used as bigotry as long as biology has been a thing. See scientific racism, eugenics, and the justification for slavery that Black people were intellectually inferior to white people. So, though turfism got its start in the US in the 70s, the ideology has largely fallen out of favor as the country's mainstream feminist movement has continually battled against the religious right for abortion access and LGBTQ rights. So, the majority of feminism here in the United States is on the right side of the issue. It's just this group, which in the UK is a lot more prominent of a group and a big issue. And I know that somewhere in here talks about the violence that has been happening in the UK because of this. So we'll see that. In a country where political coalitions on the feminist left are crucial to the survival of basic women's rights, it doesn't make much sense to spend time oppressing a tiny population who are otherwise valuable allies in the culture war. Anti-trans rhetoric, though, has power, and anti-trans harassment certainly exists. While the hardcore in-person gender-critical organizing is largely run by a small handful of people, it has become sport for these self-proclaimed feminists to harass and mock trans people and their allies on Twitter and other social media platforms. Check out some of the 80+ replies to a tweet last month by prominent feminist writer Sadie Doyle promoting a piece she wrote denouncing TERFs. Some accused Doyle of being a handmaid of the patriarchy, a common insult lobbed at cis women who ally with trans people. Or check the inevitable replies to my tweet sharing this piece when it goes online. But probably where gender critical feminism has the potential to wield the most influence is in government. US based gender critical feminist groups like Wolf and Hands Across the Aisle. Oh, wait. When I saw that, I was like, "Oh, Protestantism and Catholicism joining hands." But it's basically feminists reaching across the aisle with conservatives. So, which sent a letter to the Department of Housing and Urban Development in favor of barring trans women from women's homeless shelters, are happy to work alongside conservatives to limit the rights of trans people, even if those same conservatives want to pass legislation limiting their reproductive rights. So they're gonna join sides with the people who are destroying women's rights just so that they can destroy trans rights. It's a level of hate that's insane. So TERFs treat trans women as predators and trans men as victims of the patriarchy. So like I said, trans women are predators because they used to be men. And then trans men as victims of patriarchy because they were women and they must have somehow been fooled to think they want to be men. So that's their belief system. Gender critical feminism at its core opposes the self-definition of trans people, arguing that anyone born with a vagina is in its own oppressed sex class, while anyone born with a penis is automatically an oppressor. In a TERF world, gender is a system that exists solely to oppress women, which it does through the imposition of femininity on those assigned female at birth. So legally, redefining female as anyone who claims to be female results in the erasure of female people as a class. Wolf wrote in its SCOTUS brief, if, as a matter of law, anyone can be a woman, then no one is a woman, and sex-based protections in the law have no meaning whatsoever. So this conception of gender as a system would be relatively sound if not for the existence of LGBTQ people. Gender and sex-based oppression can be imposed on a range of people who are assigned male at birth, like gay men and, of course, trans women. In practice, however, the movement more closely resembles an organized hate campaign against a marginalized community, whether that's through online harassment or filing briefs in landmark civil rights cases. Adherents to TERF ideology treat trans women, trans men, and non-binary people much differently. Gender-critical feminists blame the patriarchy for deluding trans men into thinking they can identify out of female oppression, or blame structural homophobia for convincing trans men they can become straight men rather than lesbians. So the women in our coalition chose to set aside their differences and work together after we saw firsthand the deeply negative and downright dangerous consequences of ignoring bodily sex. Hands Across the Aisle, an organization that connects radical feminists with anti-LGBTQ groups to campaign against trans rights, said in a statement to Vox, "We watched as doctors enabled irreversible damage to our daughters' bodies. We sat stunned as boys took away our sisters' sports opportunities, and we wept as our lesbian friends poisoned their bodies with testosterone in an attempt to appear male." So just completely against anything transgender. So for anti-trans activists, establishing a narrative that trans men are really just lesbians attempting to identify out of womanhood is absolutely essential. By doing this, transitioning can be positioned as a form of conversion therapy, whereby a lesbian is forced into a male identity and de facto heterosexuality. It opens a pathway for anti-trans activists to ban trans-affirming healthcare through conversion therapy bans. So they're using... Okay, so I have to explain this because otherwise it's not going to make sense what was just said. So there are laws that are being passed against things like conversion therapy. Conversion therapy are programs, I want to say programs, or like, I don't know if they're camps, but they're definitely, they're programs to turn gay individuals straight. And the LGBTQ community and the women's rights community, everyone is fighting to stop. They're fighting to stop conversion therapy. Conversion therapy is like a conservative creation to turn people back to what God was supposedly intending them to be. And what people have realized over time is that these conversion therapy programs cause an insane amount of damage to LGBTQ community people who are forced to go through them by family members or church members, whoever it be that sticks them into that. What the trans exclusionary individuals are trying to do is they're trying to lump in hormone therapy and transition surgery as a part of conversion therapy. That way, they can destroy any path for trans people to get, the kind of healthcare that they're interested in getting. Do you understand? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So that's what that paragraph is talking about. So the issue is that conversion therapy, gay people are how they are. They didn't, choose to be that way. So trying to force to be what they don't feel like in their head is damaging. So if you do that, if you eliminate hormone therapy and transition surgery for trans people, then again, you're doing the same thing that conversion therapy is doing, but it's just they've twisted it in such a way so that they can use the people trying to stop conversion therapy to make them stop any kind of treatment for trans people. It's really twisted what is being done there, and it takes a lot of thinking and pondering about it to understand everything that's going on. And that's why I wanted to look over this. So
Quick comment.
yeah,
Is that okay?
go for it.
This is really deep what you're teaching, and I've never been exposed to this, and it's excellent. I've met people on, I'm not saying that, but I've never understood it the way that this article is explaining it, and you really have a good grasp on it, Adriana. And I was thinking about just as simple as when a child is born left-handed, and nothing was made for a left-handed person, right?
Yeah.
Can openers, everything is for right-handed. And so parents would try to change the child from a left-handed child to a right-handed child so they would fit into society's norm. And it would completely screw up the kid's brain, because the way you order things in your mind, is even geared around that, the left right thing, right? And so I was just thinking about even just something as simple as right-handed, left-handed, and how complicated this is for people with gender issues, right?
Yeah.
Wow, it's just, we just have messed people up so bad.
Yeah, I remember my cousin Andre in Romania, when he started to write with his left hand, and his mom was so mad. Because in Romania, I think they thought that right-handed people are the smart people or something. I'm not sure what it was.
Yeah.
But she was so angry with him. She just looked at him with contempt.
Considered normal.
Huh?
Yeah. It was not considered normal to be left-handed. So the teacher would tie his left hand to the back so he can use the right.
Wow.
Yes.
We're unbelievable in our discrimination abilities.
Yeah, and this is just like 20 years ago.
Yeah. No, I am. I'm 30 now. I'm not 20 years old yet. When am I? Oh, okay. I feel younger on the inside, I guess. Anyways, however, trans men themselves have pointed out that the argument fails to take into account the bodily autonomy of trans masculine people, and it is therefore not a feminist position. Trans author Jay Holm recently described in a recent blog post why and how gender critical feminists work to get trans men to return to womanhood and ultimately detransition. As a trans man, I am and always will be belittled, disrespected, spoken down to, and patronized by transphobes, wrote Hume. After all, they think I have been brainwashed and fooled into thinking I am a man. What could I possibly know? What value could my words or experience possibly have? This is, again, anti feminist. The idea that trans men are just foolish women whose words cannot have any value is deeply troubling and mirrors patriarchal behaviors towards silly girls, no matter how old or how accomplished the woman in question actually are. So he hit the point on the nail on the head there, because their uh actions are really mirroring patriarchal behaviors, these kinds of exclusionary behaviors. So that was very perfect. Non binary people, meanwhile, are often dismissed in discussions by gender critical feminists. Not so they just belittle people. They don't consider them as having any kind of intelligence. They just think they've been brainwashed. It's really actually sad when you see the damage that they're doing to individuals. And they'll be on social media like Twitter, really attacking individuals who are a part of these marginalized communities. Any chance they get, any post they make, anything they try to share with their friends, family, or the world or whatever, these people will go on there and just attack them. And it causes a lot of mental hurt and emotional damage, and it's really sad. So you can tell them a mile away by their actions for 100%. So non-binary people muddle the scientism that anti-trans feminists rely on to justify their gender essentialism. So they choose not to acknowledge non-binary existence or agency. Said Greensmith, when not erasing them entirely, TERFs will often parrot right-wing rhetoric by mocking non-binary people, suggesting they are attention seekers who don't understand their birth sex. So how fear is weaponized against trans women. Gender critical propaganda is almost entirely focused on the supposed depravity of trans women, citing rare cases to paint trans women as threats to women and children. TERFs often point to the case of Karen White. White was in prison for sexual assault when she came out as a trans woman and applied for a transfer to a woman's prison. Once there, she allegedly raped several fellow prisoners before she was eventually caught. Prison officials later admitted that they did not follow existing safeguarding procedures in granting the transfer. So, as a rape survivor myself, I find White detestable and am outraged that prison officials were so lax with their procedures and allowed White access to a vulnerable population of women. Where I differ from gender critical feminists is I don't agree with what White is representative, that White is representative of all trans women. Gender critical feminists essentially believe the existence of trans women's penises in a woman's space represents an automatic risk of rape. So these are how stereotypes are weaponized against marginalized groups. Jillian Brandstetter, media relations manager at the National Center for Transgender Equality, told Vox, given transgender people's relatively recent rise to public life and the fact that many people still don't know a transgender person, we're very vulnerable to being mischaracterized, to being maligned, and to being drowned out by dog whistles. Okay. Many gender critical feminists refuse to contend with the fact that 47% of trans women have been victims of sexual assault in their lives, instead, questioning the survey methods used to reach the conclusion. However, many trans people don't see how such questioning is any different from cis men who claim women are falsely accusing men of rape in ever larger numbers. So they're just doing the same thing that patriarchal males will do when, women say this is how many women get raped. Men will say, well, let's look at those numbers. You might be lying about how many women actually get raped. And so transgender women have a high, risk and history of sexual assault, but trans exclusionary feminists will say, no, those numbers can't be right. Something's wrong with your research. They just can't accept that. So this supposed concern for cis women and children has become the primary method for radicalizing gender critical feminists, similar to how Islamophobes play up threats of gang rape of white women by Muslim men, or white supremacists have historically painted Black men as sexual threats to justify segregation. Defending purity of white womanhood has always been a significant axis of common bigotries, and gender critical feminism operates in the same fashion. With stranger danger drilled into the heads of women and girls from a young age, anti-trans feminists can easily point the other as a constant sexual threat, despite the fact that studies have repeatedly shown that women are most likely to be sexually assaulted by someone they already know. So if trans people are given anti-discrimination protections, Wolf writes in its brief, it will mark a truly fundamental shift in American law and policy that strips women of their right to privacy, threatens their physical safety, undercuts the means by which women can achieve professional and educational quality, and ultimately works to erase women and girls under the law. So they see trans people as a threat to womanhood, basically. So with its hyper focus on the supposed threat of trans women in women's spaces, gender critical feminism ultimately lets misogynistic men slide under the radar. If everyone is watching for deviant trans women or men claiming to be trans women, who is watching for the respected public figure perpetuating horrific sexual abuse against women and girls? So they're basically moving the focus off of who's actually causing the crime to a group that's just marginalized and being victimized, and saying that they're the abusers. So online turfism has infiltrated academia and often manifests into more harassment. While gender critical feminism has long had roots in academia, which there's the feminist literature is a rabbit hole you could go down into that I don't think we are ever going to have time for anything like that to go into the in-depth arguments. There's been a lot over the years really looking deep at these issues and trying to figure out how women's rights and LGBTQ rights and trans rights work. But because of that, and because of gender studies programs in academia, this inevitably ends up being a part of the discussion because it has something to do with stereotypes of gender and all of that. So it always ends up working its way into academia. So extending back to Raymond and her cohorts in the 1970s, renewed public interest in trans discourse has created opportunities for academics to make a name for themselves. Recently, a small handful of gender-critical philosophers have managed to leverage media coverage to gain a mainstream platform from which to express their transphobic views. Historically speaking, issues around sexuality and gender have been of relatively marginal importance for philosophy departments and relatively significant importance for humanities departments and the literary or cultural studies. Grace Levery, a trans woman and professor of 19th century British literature at Berkeley, told Vox, but that distinction or that institutional boundary has begun to fray. Gender critical philosophy has become a sort of cottage industry where previously unheralded academics can achieve an online following by reciting the theory du jour in online radical feminist spaces. British philosopher Kathleen Stock, a self-identifying gender-critical feminist and one of the group's more authoritative figures, has written perhaps half a dozen different manifestos over the past few years on trans exclusion and the definition of womanhood. One of the things I find interesting, and on that point, actually, while we're here, what they go into with this womanhood thing is, again, they're the ones who are propping up gender stereotypes as well, because they really can't accept, from what I've seen, there's a really big hatred for men. But if you were, an actual feminist, you would want men to be able to express themselves with more, if they wanted to, with more feminine characteristics. So if a man wanted to be more emotional or felt that, he was more emotional and wanted to express that, and was a more gentle individual and all of that, you're basically trying to draw a line to keep them from that as well. So it ends up doing a lot of damage, not just for trans people, but for LGBTQ plus people and for, cis people. So I don't, it's a very twisted mindset to have. So one of the things I find interesting to watch is the changing in their positions, said Lavery of Gender Critical Academics. I think they imagined that the questions they were asking would have easier answers than they did. I think, for example, they imagined earlier on that it was going to be quite easy to use chromosomes as a basis for a kind of biological sex distinction, binary sex distinction. And they've now more or less entirely abandoned chromosomes as a singular determinant, as far as I can tell. Because again, there's variation in chromosomes, because there's variation in genetics, and so they can't use that. So graduate philosophy student Krista Peterson has spent quite a bit of time tracking the positions and social media activity of gender critical philosophers, and she explained why these philosophers seem to change positions so frequently. What's happening here is a popular movement that's coming into academia rather than these people having philosophical projects on this stuff that gives them these conclusions, she told Vox. They're getting what they're representing as philosophical conclusions from the gender critical subreddit and other people on Twitter. So earlier this year, Lavery decided to step into the debate because as a tenured professor, she felt like she was one of the few trans academics in a position to push back on the growing anti-trans rhetoric she was seeing around her. After initially dipping her toe into the discourse, she wrote a piece that was critical of Stock. Two gender critical journalists share Stock's response, and that's when Lavery really started feeling the heat. It led to a massive explosion of online harassment, which I just didn't see coming at all, she said. People in the seemingly hundreds started trying to find me and just write insulting things about me. And that escalated to the degree that it was totally out of control. At one point, people were posting the names and contact details and photographs, not only of me, but also my colleagues at UC Berkeley online. Generally, among academics, the work of their gender critical peers is viewed as a legitimate academic work, trusting the credentials of the philosophers who have jumped into the issue. However, when Stock was invited to speak on her views on gender and sexuality at the Aristotelian Society in early June, her speech drew protests online. In recent years and months, attacks on the trans community have been led by a number of prominent philosophers and are made to seem legitimate due to the unwillingness of the wider community to speak up and protect its most vulnerable members, read a joint statement by Minorities in Philosophy UK and Minorities in Philosophy International. Not every item of personal and ideological obsession is worthy of philosophical debate. In particular, skepticism about the rights of marginalized groups and individuals where issues of life and death are at stake are not up for debate. Yet, this hasn't stopped Stock from being published. Her work is cited in several MSI briefs to the Supreme Court in the Stevens case, showing how gender critical academia is assisting to legitimize anti-trans policy positions. In effect, gender critical academics are laundering the whims of online TERFs into official policy. So groups like Wolf may have liberation in their name, but they have ultra-conservative ties. This brings us back to how TERFism can wield great power in policy and politics, and who they will align with to push their ideology forward. Wolf has made no bones about partnering with misogynistic and anti-LGBTQ organizations like the Alliance Defending Freedom in order to oppose the livelihoods of trans people to the Supreme Court. In fact, the Stevens case isn't the first time the two groups have worked together on an anti-trans Supreme Court case. In early 2017, Wolf submitted an amicus brief opposing trans students Gavin Grimm's lawsuit to use the boys' bathroom at his school. That case was eventually remanded back to the lower court, which just recently ruled in Grimm's favor once again. Let's see here. Wolf's relationship with ADF extends beyond just filing briefs in key cases. LGBTQ Nation reported that in fiscal year 2017, the most recent year for which the feminist group's financial records are available, Wolf applied for and accepted a $15,000 grant from the ultra-conservative group. The LGBTQ Nation report additionally revealed in 2017 that Wolf contracted with Imperial Independence Media for help with fundraising, promising a 20% commission. At the time, IIM was run by Zachary Freeman, who made a name for himself over a lawsuit to leak abortion clinic employee names to the Center for Medical Progress, an anti-abortion group known for propagating heavily doctored videos purporting to show Planned Parenthood profiting off of sale of fetal tissue. I remember those videos when they were going around online too. They seemed really crazy. And I didn't know that they were heavily doctored and all of that. So it's interesting to see that. Wolf defended its deal with Freeman in its aforementioned statement to Vox. Wolf has never hired anyone who endangered the lives of abortion clinic workers. It said, Wolf did once enter into a contract with someone who had previously exercised his right under the Freedom of Information Act related to matters that had nothing to do with Wolf. Also, in its statement, Wolf defended a recent blog post that attacked Planned Parenthood's commitment to trans-inclusive care. In fact, nearly every blog post on Wolf's site is anti-trans, post arguing against trans women in women's prisons, trans girls in girls' sports, trans women in women's homeless shelters. So there is a little call to any feminist issue that isn't an attack on trans people at its core. I don't know how much, let me see here. Let me just do that real quick. I just need to see. Okay, that's not that much. Can someone else take over reading? My throat is starting to hurt a little bit.
I can.
Yeah, I can read.
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead, Phil.
Okay. Though it's unknown who funds another prominent gender critical group, Hands Across the Aisle, one of its co-founders is Kaylee Triller Haver, an anti-abortion conservative who has reportedly admitted to committing statutory rape of a teenage boy when she was a youth counselor. Anti-trans alliance with conservative groups are by no means new for gender critical feminists. During the Irish referendum on abortion right in 2018, some British gender critical feminists withheld support for campaigners who supported abortion rights, citing the trans supportive attitudes of Irish feminism, going so far as to schedule an anti-trans meeting in Dublin at the height of the campaign season. Irish feminists responded with a scathing open letter denouncing the event and reaffirming their support for the womanhood of trans women. In January, the Conservative Heritage Foundation held an event in Washington, D.C., featuring members of Wolf to discuss the Equality Act and their opposition to trans rights. 2 days later, prominent British anti-trans feminists Kelly J. Keane Minshall, also known as Posey Parker, and Julia Long, who had been in town attending the panel, stormed a Capitol Hill office where Human Rights Campaign National Press Secretary Sarah McBride had just concluded a meeting between parents of trans children and legislators. The Heritage Foundation told Vox it had nothing to do with Keane, Minshall, and Long being in the US and had no contact with them before or after our January 28 event and have zero connection to anything they did afterward. They filmed themselves yelling and taunting McBride with their personal gripes with the trans movement, accusing her of not caring about lesbian girls. McBride, to her credit, didn't take the bait, remaining stone-faced and focused on her computer screen while a coworker attempted to de-escalate the situation. Brandstetter compares the deployment of so-called feminists to oppose trans rights to the white nationalist movement, rebranding themselves as the alt-right to achieve a veneer of respectability. When people call organizations like these TERFs, it's doing that same job for them, she said. It's portraying it as this divide within the progressive movement, of this divide within the LGBTQ community that only serves to benefit people who hate women and the LGBTQ community, including Heritage, the FRC, Family Research Council, and the ADF. Certainly, we should not be shocked that they're desperate to sort of put up decoys. I just can't imagine how you can walk through the doors of the Heritage Foundation as a heralded guest and continue to call yourself an advocate for women's equality. In the US, Baltimore gender-critical feminist Julia Beck has made a name for herself in conservative circles, appearing on Tucker Carlson's show on Fox News and testifying before the House against trans inclusions in the Violence Against Women Act and Equality Act. I sat 10 feet from Julia Beck in the House Equality Act hearing and heard her say the violence faced by transgender women is a myth, said Brandstetter, who noted that anti-trans feminists, like their conservative partners, have begun pushing a claim that trans people do not face much discrimination and violence, an assertion without evidence. Not 24 hours before she said that, not 2 miles from where she said that, Ashanti Carmen was murdered on Eastern Avenue in DC. I think it's telling that they have to promote this trans violence trutherism in order to feel justified in their own hatred. According to Greensmith, Beck employed the diversionary tactic of spouting inaccuracies, forcing those engaged in debates to constantly refute them rather than engage with the real issues. Everything she was saying was a lie, said Greensmith, referring to Beck's testimony. We keep getting trapped in that cycle of proving what she says is wrong. Here you and I are saying, but in fact, 24 hours earlier, a trans woman was killed. There will always be a trans person getting harmed because that is a reality. But instead of talking about why, then we need the Equality Act. We're forced to instead to do what happened at the hearing. All the House Democrats and the other witnesses had to contradict Julia Beck. It worked. Having her there worked perfectly. That's misinformation, disinformation. That's just lies. Gender critical feminism doesn't have the same tractions in the US as it does in the UK, but groups still wield power. In fairness, several prominent gender critical feminists have themselves denounced the movement's cooperation with arch conservatives such as Jean Hatchett, who cited Wolf's connection with the ADF in a blog post stating her opposition. But those appeals haven't appeared to slow down the merging of TERFism with the larger conservative political apparatus. Thus, just this month, gender critical feminists who have been banned from Twitter for extensive transphobic harassment have recently organized under the alt-right message board Gab to form Spinster, a social media platform for TERFs. It remains to be seen whether the British message board Mumsnet will remain the epicenter for gender critical messaging, but the movement's growing connection with anti-abortion and violent misogynist movements should concern both cisgender and transgender women. According to Brandstetter, the recent gender critical wave has largely failed to gain traction in the US outside the very far right spheres. I don't think American women are buying it, she said, pointing out that nearly every major US feminist advocacy group is vocally pro-trans right and inclusion. It's because they understand what is meant to be marginalized. They understand that any strict rules placed around gender are to the benefit of nobody.
Really quick, I wanted to just make a point. A big reason why this is in the general public right now and why it is going to have more of an effect on the US is because of J.K. Rowling. I don't know if you guys recognize that author.
Yeah.
She's the one who did those Harry Potter books. And she's got a big following, obviously, because of who she is. And she's from the UK. And she is a very staunch trans exclusionary radical feminist. And she's done a lot of papers and a lot of publications where on her beliefs of excluding trans people. So she's stoking the flames here quite a bit, and that's what's been going on in recent times. And you might hear it on the news, so I just wanted to pop that in there. Anyways.
Conservative groups, in turn, have made a conscious decision to use feminist language and framing to oppose trans rights, which is how we ended up with some of the most vehemently anti-women politicians in the House voting against the Violence Against Women Act in the name of protecting women and girls. This unholy alliance, backed up with academic scholarship written by TERFs, could end up having devastating consequence to the standing of women and girls in the US and across the globe. In the Supreme Court case, Wolf is taking the side that claims employers have the right to mandate that women wear skirts, but arguing that Amy Stevens believed that only women can wear skirts. If Wolf truly believed in the abolition of gender as it claims, he would be petitioning to allow Stevens to present at work in whatever gender she wishes without risk of being fired. Wolf's argument reveals the big gender critical lie. It's more important to TERF to put cis women in a stricter box and enforce sex-based dress codes than it is to give trans women equal employment rights. And if TERFs prevail, then all women and non-binary people lose. Caitlin Burns is a freelance journalist based in the Washington, D.C. Okay, first only openly transgender Capitol Hill reporter in the U.S. history. Her other works can be seen in the Washington Post, Teen Vogue, Vice, and many others. Correction.
Oh yeah, read that because that might be important for whoever wants to know.
Okay, correction. An earlier version of this story cited links that appeared on Hands Across the Aisle's website. The links to various groups do not reflect any known ties. This piece has also been updated to include a statement from the Heritage Foundation and to clarify that the protest against Kathleen Stock were online.
Which is nice to see, assessing journalism to be able to improve and stick by standards. But there's two reasons why I wanted to focus on this, even though it's not as big of a deal in the United States. It is in the UK, and it's important for us to know all the issues that are happening. And I think it is going to end up becoming a bigger issue in the United States. And there's two reasons why I wanted us and why we should have this understanding about this group. First of all, it's a feminist group on the liberal side that has it completely wrong, and they are performing sexism through these actions and their belief system. What they have is sexism, whether they're willing to admit that or not. So that's the first issue. The second issue is that this is a liberal group who will unite with the conservatives to persecute, a minority. And that's kind of what we're expecting in the future. So I just wanted to show how kind of that happens. And I thought that this was an important thing to look at. I hope it was helpful, and I know it helps put more pieces of the puzzle together to understand sexism and gender and stereotypes and marginalized groups. So
Yeah,
hope
no,
that-
I think you're correct in bringing this to our attention. Because you tell lies long enough, it becomes the truth, and people will believe it. And we've seen that with Trump. We've seen that with what's that group with Bannon and can't remember the group now.
You're talking about Bannon and Sessions?
Right, but
The
the
Tea
organization.
The Tea Party?
No.
What?
You tell people that the group that experimented on people's emotions.
Cambridge Analytica.
There you go.
Okay.
Yes, thank you. So yeah, it was good to bring this to our attention. Thank you.
Yeah, so it just helps develop a rounder picture of all the discrimination that's happening and how very weird and twisted and subtle and confusing some of the arguments can be. But thankfully, because of their radical actions, it's actually pretty easy to pick them out and see what they're doing and how bad it is. If it was just their arguments, then it would have been a little bit confusing. Another thing I just wanted to point out, since we're going to be looking at different articles and everyone's doing studies on their own, you're inevitably going to come across this, and I didn't know how to explain this issue, but I'm going to try. How a lot of science, the standard is evolution, and evolutionary teachings is accepted. So in biology, geology, all of these sciences, correct? And you're going to have two fields. And so there's evolutionary biology. And as far as the people who believe in evolution in the majority of the scientific community, they're very clear. I know that they believe everything what they believe, but because of mitochondrial DNA tests that they did in the late 1980s, I think 1987, they're able to realize that there aren't differences there is no such thing as races among people. It's just one human race, and we're all really very equal. And it's just very minor differences in like how we present with like skin color and eye color and things like that. And on top of that, they've shown how there's equality between men and women and not a lot of difference between brains and capability. So they've been upholding equality, okay? So you're going to find different kinds of articles. So this group will, for the most part, uphold equality. There's another group that if you ever see any articles by them, don't get them confused with this. It's called evolutionary psychology.
Before you pass on that one, is that wrong, what you were just talking about? The evolutionary biology where...
I'm just saying that because of pretty much all scientific articles are standing on the basis of evolution, you can't really get around that. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
And we're going to be researching articles. This group here, from what I found, and I'm still kind of researching it out myself, trying to figure out what's happening, because it can get really confusing. And in the mainstream media, a lot of the discussion that's going to go on around sex and gender is going to have to do with studying for them this field, because they're trying to understand the brain chemicals and physiological differences between men and women and genders and all of that. So it's going to come from here. So we're inevitably going to run into articles talking about these things, okay? And I just want everyone to be aware of the fact this one tries to take a very like unbiased scientific approach, but evolutionary psychology is alt-right. And evolutionary psychology is the kind of weird type of science that has come up that's trying to say that how men and women act in a traditional gender roles is how it's meant to be. And for the furthering of the human race, they have to act that way. And they really end up pushing a lot of alt-right and conservative agendas. And they eventually, I think one person was saying, well, technically in the animal kingdom, rape is beneficial for men if they do it to women, and just we and the females. It's just really crazy. So this is bad. This is all, anything from this, I haven't seen anything from this that comes out with any kind of useful anything. But because it's all kind of sounding the same, it's easy to get confused. Do you know what I mean? Some Elder Parmenter has cited studies as well, and all of them are kind of based with this, in science, this is what their basic thing is. But there's just studies that come up with the answers that we need sometimes. But I'm just going to say right now, if you see this anywhere, don't finagle with it. You can always try to do research on your own and see what's happening there, but I just wanted to point that out. It's so much, and my head hurts so bad sometimes.
There's your two streams of information.
Yeah, pretty much the science version of it, I guess. Yeah, oh, my head hurts when it comes to all that other stuff. I'm not gonna lie. Oh no, I can't stop sharing. So now we're gonna go to our other plan, if everyone remembers, and now we're gonna get some volunteers. If everyone remembers what the plan was. Okay.
I'll take South Korea.
Okay. Let me zoom in here. South. Okay. We'll put you down here. Everybody start picking countries. And I would
Remind us again what we're researching on these different countries.
Let me actually show you. So I just want a really basic, I just put something really basic, like a basic outline together, just to give everyone some direction of what to look at. So what we want to do, and I talked to Elder Tess about this as well, and she did want to warn, and now I want to transfer that warning to all of us. This is going to be pretty heartbreaking. There's a lot of bad stuff going on out there. And she sent me an article of what's happening in India, which is it's just gut wrenching, all the bad things that are happening. So it's not going to be a happy experience, I guess. We're definitely going to see the sorrow of the people of this earth for sure. So it's going to be a little rough.
No, you're quite right. I've already been looking at some of the violence against women and girls in South Korea, and it's not even human.
It's exactly. It's animal. It's monstrous. It's horrifying. It's horrible. So what I thought would be, if you want to follow this, it's fine. If not, if you just find really important things that you think that are happening there with the discrimination and sexism, that's all we're trying to look for, to see what all is happening in the world today in these different countries that have to do with discrimination and sexism and LGBTQ community. But if you want to do like a little basic history, a really brief basic history of the country, just like, when it became a country, and just some very, very, just like a couple sentences. I think it'd be interesting to know the dominant religion of that area, because we can kind of figure out if that's patriarchal or not. And then a little bit of religious history, up to you if you want to do that. And then the main one is just the issue of sexism and discrimination and equality in the culture. That's the main one. If you just want to focus on that, that's fine. So we just want to see what issues are going on there today that has to do with equality and discrimination and sexism and discrimination. Okay. So, Fel, I'm gonna start putting these in red so I have them. Okay, so these are the list of countries by biggest population to smallest population. So I thought we'd just work our way down. Who wants to take China or India, Indonesia, Pakistan?
I'll take India.
Linda, is that you?
Yeah.
Got it.
I'll take Bangladesh.
Linda, okay, Bangladesh for Tony.
I knew some
I
friends
know, I
there.
know.
No, what am I doing? Okay, Tony.
I'll try
David
Japan,
wants Mexico.
David. And
Mexico, David.
who else was that? I heard someone else.
Yeah, I
Japan
heard
for Susan.
Susan, what?
Japan. I'll do.
Ooh, Japan, Susan. That's a rough one.
Is
You
it?
That's a
know,
sad
Maybe I
one
won't
too.
then.
They're all sad.
they are, the age of consent in Japan for girls is 13 and they've been trying to change it, but they can't. That's just so messed up there. It's sad everywhere. Anyways, anyone
I'll
else?
take Thailand, Jackie.
Jackie.
Thailand.
Gotcha.
Is there anybody else who already opened up their mics? I thought I heard somebody else.
Oh, go ahead, Logina. Go ahead and do Philippines.
I would take Iran.
Well, Gina,
That'll be ugly, Elaine.
yeah. Well, they did have a small period of some awesome feminist rights there, but now it's not so great anymore.
I guess I'll take United Kingdom.
Anna, is that you?
That's me, Anna.
Okay, where is it? There it is. Okay,
Do you have Romania?
it's on here. You want mom? You want Romania?
Is that fair?
It is. It's just a little bit down the hill here
Okay.
with population. Let me
Oh.
do. What's the shortcut to search for a word?
Can you put them in alphabetical order?
No.
When do we present these?
Next Sabbath, we're gonna start. So you're not expected to take the entire presentation time, however long it takes to just read slowly through them. There's a lot of countries, so we need to do multiple, as many as we can in one meeting, but still get the gist of the stuff that's going on there.
Actually, I was thinking about Ireland. Can I either exchange or maybe add?
Yeah, well, people are gonna have to do multiple, so let's add
Okay,
you.
Ireland, because I didn't know Ireland was on your list. So yeah, let me take
Is it on here or did it go under UK?
Adriana, isn't there a magnifying glass on the, is that a search on the left?
I'm just wearing my glasses.
No, not to magnify it, not to go in further, but does that magnifying, is that sometimes it symbolizes a search?
It's not
It's
a
not.
search.
Okay.
What was the shortcut? Was it FN function what?
I do Control F.
Control F, okay.
There's Ireland right down there.
There we go.
There it is.
Right below
Romania, there you are, Romania. We're gonna do, okay, you highlighted it. Christina, we'll just pop that in red. Let's see if we've got Ireland here. Ireland. Who wanted this one? Anna. Okay, let's pop that on there. All right, we're just gonna keep using this little search box because that's great.
I'm gonna take Russia. Did you do Russia?
Yes, Tony. Yes, take Russia.
Uh-oh.
Good one. Okay.
And give me what were the 3 or 4 things we were looking at so I can write that down?
The
Basic
main
history.
one is this last one.
I'll put it out in the email too.
Okay.
You can take a quick picture with your phone.
Oh yeah, thanks. Hold it. I'll tell you after let me get the camera.
These three just really brief, just a couple sentences. It's this main last one that's the
Got it.
discrimination. I'll add that on there. So
Thank you.
I'll take Belarus.
yes, control.
What are you supposed to be taking?
Belarus? Is that how you spell it? No. How do you spell Belarus?
Belarus. No, Belarus. Belarus.
Ah, got it.
There you go.
What are you supposed to be doing, babe?
I want you.
Where is Paraguay?
Huh?
Where is Paraguay?
South America.
South
Yeah.
America? Okay.
Yeah.
It's by Uruguay, isn't it? Too?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I got 2 requests.
Yeah.
Madagascar and Australia.
Australia is a good one. Tess said there's some stuff coming out with sexism and politics there a lot. And they have the thing with Aborigines there too. So did I spell that right, Francisco? Have I forgotten your name?
You get an A.
Francisco. And then Australia, which didn't have as big of a population as I had thought. But
A lot of land, nowhere to live.
what was that, Kathy? What do you want?
No, I was just saying Australia is a lot of land, but nowhere to live. It's
Renee will do Iceland.
Yay.
And we're supposed to take more than one?
Yeah.
I'll take Vietnam.
Watch it now.
Yeah.
What did he say?
Watch it now.
Is that how do you spell Renee, or am I Renee?
R-E-N-A-E.
R-E-N-N.
Oh, R-E-N-N-N-N-A.
Is that one right there?
R-E-N-N-A-E.
Oh, that's good.
Okay.
2 N's.
There you go.
Spell check always goofs that name up. When I send you a message, it always goofs up your name. I apologize, Renee.
I think he's the only one with that double N. I don't know. I'm trying to think of another country that does that, like nobody knows. What is Belize? I'm trying to think of countries I have no
Belize
idea.
is in Central America.
Yeah, that's South
It's
America. He's right.
Yeah, it's right next to Mexico, southern Mexico.
Okay, and what's Malta?
It's African, isn't it?
Mediterranean, isn't it?
My
Oh,
girlfriend's
yeah.
from Malacca.
You know, I'll take Malta too.
So you want?
I don't know anything about it, so I'll take things that I don't know.
Yeah, we're gonna really get some good geography going. Learn ourselves the
David
world.
wants
What do you want to take? Another one?
Brother Troy wants Peru.
No one picked Fiji.
David wants Cyprus.
Troy, not Peru.
Yeah. David wants Cyprus. Is that what I heard?
Yes.
Okay.
Where's Cyprus?
Near Israel, isn't it?
Yeah, I think that's also Mediterranean, isn't it?
Mediterranean, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Near Israel, I thought it was. David. No.
Nope. We're watching you.
What is happening?
Control Z to undo.
No, it's there's a wheel on my tablet and it keeps changing. Cyprus. David. Okay. And what else was there?
I'll try Slovenia.
Yeah, I'll get some
I don't
good-
know anything about it, so I'll learn something.
Here's a chance to research all the places you wanted to go on vacation. Where's Slovenia?
Right down there in the middle.
Ah, I see it. I see it. It didn't highlight it. All right.
Could put me down for China.
The big one. Okay. Okay.
Ooh, oh, I got another one. Manor,
Myanmar.
man, whatever that is, whatever
Yeah.
is going on there, yeah.
Yeah,
That's
the one
that's
with all
scary
the-
stuff.
Mm-hmm. They just had a really bad,
Killing.
they just killed a whole bunch of people today.
Yeah, I saw that this morning.
Yep.
How do you spell? Can someone figure out how you spell Myanmar?
It's down there next, right above.
Myanmar. Uh-huh.
Look at how funny that is that did that. Let me get this tablet out of the way before it just deletes everything that I do. Okay, that should work.
You could put me down for Tanzania.
And everybody's writing down what they're choosing, right?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
And I want one more.
Go for it.
Egypt.
Ooh, good one. Where's Egypt? I know it was right there. It is.
Logina, Logina. Correct?
Yep,
Yes. No, I remember. I think that's right.
it is right.
We'll take Turkey.
Ooh.
Yeah, that's gonna
Linda?
be-
Right?
Yeah.
Germany.
Okay. Wants to do France or Brazil? Italy?
I'll do Brazil.
Jackie?
Are we gonna go through this whole list?
Not today. Just as
No, I
many
mean, are we putting our names down there or what?
Yeah, so you think we have enough to start out with here?
So
I
what's
think
your name? What'd you choose?
I'll whatever's left. I can do
Did
one.
everybody choose something?
I'll do France and Italy.
Not everybody.
I think I have 3.
I think we have at least we're good for 2 weeks.
Yeah, I think so too.
Oh.
So we definitely, I don't think we'll just get through however many we can. What I think we can do is
Troy wants Uganda.
Where's Uganda? There it is.
Even South Sudan has a lot of problems, but I don't see that there. I see Sudan, but not South Sudan.
Change that to Troy for Uganda.
I thought that was Susan.
It was her voice,
Yeah,
but
I
she was
spoke.
for Troy. She was speaking for Troy.
Saudi Arabia.
Yemen, put me down for, isn't it Yemen or is it
Yep, Yemen.
Y-A-M-E-N?
That's Yemen. Mhm.
Okay. I thought it was Y-E.
That's a place of horrors
Yep.
there.
Yep.
I'll do Nepal.
Ooh, yeah. Control F. Wait, am I not spelling that right?
Oh,
It's
Oh, there it
right
is.
below Elaine's.
Gotcha.
Rwanda.
Where do you see that on here? 'Cause
On
I-
the bottom, it starts with the,
Got it, got it.
yep, okay.
Oh, Brother Troy.
Yeah, it has some challenges, big challenges.
God bless you, Brother Troy.
Amen.
What's going on?
He wrote in the chat that right now he's feeding his son who's disabled.
God bless you.
Yeah, let me take North Korea too. I might as well do the whole Korea there. See what if there's a difference.
North Korea's way down here somewhere.
You just had it. I was watching it the last yeah, before you moved it.
It's way down here. Okay, let me find. Sorry.
I just saw that when you scrolled, I saw the Holy See at the bottom.
I just saw that too. I wrote it on my paper.
Yeah, and I was thinking, well, I guess they are a city state, but I didn't think of them as a country or that it was listed as the Holy See like that.
Yeah, I never even heard it. So I'm gonna look at that one too, Adriana.
It is a country.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Very a small country.
Yeah, that's.
Yeah, North Korea is
Oh, there it is. There it is.
down. Yeah.
And Tony, you said the Holy See.
Yeah, and then I'm done. That should be a lot.
Yeah, these are the only two that I've never heard of.
Right.
I've never heard of those countries. I was like, wow, of all my years on the planet, I actually managed to hear all the other 200 something countries.
Now I have a cousin who went to Ecuador to retire, so I saw Ecuador on the list.
Yeah,
that one.
Ecuador's on here. And I definitely didn't spell that right.
Ecuador, AECU.
Someone help me out here. How do you spell
Yeah, I
that?
think it's EC.
It's EC.
Yes, ECUA.
That's
There you
right.
go. Yeah.
That American spelling just too hard to shake.
Didn't even speak a lick of Spanish, and she had to learn it on her own because that's where she wanted to live. So.
That Anna, right?
Yep.
Okay.
That's right.
Is Trinidad a country?
Yeah.
I'll take Trinidad.
Yeah, Trinidad and Tobago, I always hear.
Yeah.
Is it not
Trinidad and
listed?
Tobago.
Oh, yeah, there it is.
Do you
Okay.
have Spain?
Yeah.
So you
Donna
can add,
Renee.
you can add, put Renee on that. Spain, RENNAE.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
It says it's misspelled. See? Let's add it to dictionary.
Troy's also adding Jamaica.
Who?
Troy. Jamaica.
I want the Dominican Republic, Kathy Brown.
Okay.
Kathy.
Okay, Kathy.
It's Kathy B. It's Kathy. I'm the only one there.
Kathy B. Okay. Okay.
Well, I want Cuba too. That's the one I wanted. Yeah, Cuba.
So let's leave off the rest. If you think any other ones, you can always we can always do more next week.
Yep.
But let me get 5 volunteers to do one of their countries for next week. Or if there's not 5, we'll just have one person do more than one. let's have that so that way we can have something set up and we know who's presenting.
Volunteer.
So,
And I volunteer after Francisco.
okay, so we'll do Francisco.
What time are you doing this part?
The same time we do the evening meeting. So instead of the gender stuff we've been reading, now we're going to look at the problems with sexism and discrimination in all the other countries. So it's going to be the evening study time.
Which is which one? What time is that?
After lunch.
It's Elaine.
So okay, so 1:30 or
I think it's
whatever.
after lunch.
Yeah. Today it was 2, but yeah, you generally run 1:30.
Because it depends on the schedule, whether we're on Schedule A or Schedule B, which is Parmenter schedule. And it depends on how late the morning worship, when we finish, then we have an hour from there. So we can give you a guesstimate, in the afternoon.
Yeah, oh, that's helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, but it's the afternoon, after lunch, I mean.
Okay.
Do we have to do a slide, or you just want us to read from what we find, or how do you want to do that?
Anything you want.
Oh.
Anything you want. Just share an article. If it's a video, we'll try to accommodate. We'll have to pause recording if that's the thing we can do. Just something to help us understand everything that's going on around the world. So Francisco, Tony, anyone else wanna?
If you still need one more, I'll go next week. One of them.
I'll go too.
Is that Jackie? Jackie. Okay.
Question.
I'll
I'll
give it a try too. You wanted 5.
What was that, Anna?
I'm sorry, do we have to do all the countries that we picked in the?
No, just pick 1 or 2 to just research this week and have.
Okay, I guess I can do Ireland.
Okay, we might not get to you, but I'm gonna put you on. If we do end up having time, you can come in with Ireland. Sound good?
Sounds good to me.
All right, I think that's good. All right, next week, evening study. Here we are. And one last thing I wanted to share, which I think you will all like, and I thought was really interesting, and it's been.
Is it happy?
It's really kind of neat. If I can find what I'm looking for.
Can you scoot back to that little list real quick?
Loop.
Please. Jackie, Susan, Anna, thank you.
I want to look at Genesis. Was it chapter? Yes. Genesis chapter 11. This is what I initially messaged Tess about. Oh, I don't like how it did that. But if you have a chance, I thought this was interesting because this was another curse. So we had those first 3, and the racism was the nationalism with Ham, but I was looking at this one and it also seems like a nationalism curse, which is also being resolved now that we have access to interpretation and the languages are changing. I'm going to read here, and the whole earth was of one language and of one speech. And it came to pass as they journeyed from the east that they found a plain in the land of Shinar, and they dwelt there. And they said one to another, Go to, let us make brick and burn them thoroughly. And they had bricks for stone, and slime had they for mortar. I don't like all these. And they said, Go to, let us build us a city and a tower whose top may reach unto heaven, and let us make us a name, lest we be scattered abroad upon the face of the whole earth. So the whole earth was of one language and one speech, and they were in unity. Babylon. But that's not, just watch this. And the Lord came down to see the city and the tower which the children of men builded. And the Lord said, Behold, the people is one. The people is one, and they have all one language. And this they begin to do, which was a bad thing. and now nothing will be restrained from them which they have imagined to do, which he just finished cleansing the earth with water for doing everyone's imagination. So what he had to do is let us go down and there confound their language, that they may not understand one another's speech. So the Lord scattered them abroad from thence upon the face of all the earth, and they left off to build the city. So we were always taught Babel is church and state and all of that, but all the cities and all the nations back in those Old Testament times, they were all church and state. But Babel was also nationalism, because that's where the curse of nationalism came in, right? One of them. So it's another form of it, because they were all united and everyone was of one language. But now we have nation against nation, and no one's ever been united ever again since.
Yeah.
So I
That's
just thought
true.
it was interesting that
Wow.
you have nationalism at Babel, and Babylon is nationalism at the end. And the same way God originally had everything one language and everyone was united, and then a curse came in and destroyed all that. Now at the end that we're going back to Eden, you have one major common language, and all this translation that can happen between everyone that kind of undoes that as well. So it was just interesting. I thought you'd like it.
Amen.
Anyways, that's all I got. Oh, okay.
Hopefully everybody wrote down what they're doing. I took some notes on what we're doing next week at least, and I'll at least include that in the emails going out just in case.
I wrote all my notes and what we're supposed to do. I wrote them.
It'll always be saved here in this note thingy too as well if we have to go back to it. So
okay. Sounds good.
How do we go back to it?
On Sabbath when I'm here.
What?
On Sabbath when I'm here.
Elaine's gonna post it.
No, I just took down the notes that I took. I'd have to have a whole file, which I think is a pretty big spread out file.
So are you going to put the template in there, the basic history, the dominant religion?
Yeah, the template I'm going to do, and who's up next week.
Cool.
Okay.
Yeah.
I missed, Adriana, when you were writing in the basic template, you added something to the last line.
Discrimination. The word discrimination. Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Yep.
Didn't you take a picture?
I did, but it wasn't until it was before she wrote the extra stuff, and I didn't catch it. I'm like, oh,
I got 3 pictures. Yeah, then I finally got it.
Okay. Okay. Who wants to that went longer than normal. I'm sorry, but who wants to close off in prayer? Tony, since your mic is still on, would you want to?
I will. Let me to, yeah. Holy Heavenly Father, Lord God Almighty, we thank you so very much for this day. It was awesome, Father. I thank you for your presence, and I thank you for your angels. I thank you that in the beginning, we were so united, and we're still so united, Father. I truly believe that we may have even taken a step closer with each other, that we know each other a lot better, and that we are grateful for each other, Father. We were able to say things to each other and not be afraid. And we know that we do this to help others too, Father. And it's not like we lift ourselves up. It's like we tried to glorify you. I thank you for what we are just learning now with all these countries, and what we have to do, and look at the equality of the countries and how people are treated and what their religions are like. And I think it would be very interesting. So I pray for your Holy Spirit, Father, to help each and every one of us, talk with us, direct us, and help us to have good presentations. I thank you for this family, Father. I thank you for you and your angels, and I give thanks in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
Amen.